When talking about gank bosses in Souls, let's get the obvious out of the way first. Many of these bosses are not great, or they're even bad. Not because fighting two enemies at once is a bad idea, but because most of them weren't designed to be fought together. There is a difference between a fight built around multiple enemies and a fight where someone tossed two bosses in a room and called it a day. So before we figure out what the best gank fight in Souls is, let's start at the worst one. Any fight where the boss has no new mechanics and it's just two duplicate enemies or, God forbid, bosses. Most of this type of gank boss exists in the dungeons of Elden Ring and the optional content of Dark Souls 2. This is the most common multi-boss in the series. 2 Crucible Knights, 2 Erdtree Burial Watchdogs, or 2 cats at the end of Reindeer Fuckland. My problem with these fights is that there's no design intention to this. These bosses don't interact with each other at all, and their AI isn't tuned to account for 2 of them coexisting. So you end up with a fight that consists of running around, hoping they desync, and sometimes they attack in a way that leaves no gaps to survive. The best way to deal with these bosses is almost always to just be a high enough level that they're not a problem. There's no intentional role separation, you are just fighting 2 fully functioning solo enemies at the same time. So every duplicate enemy fight, especially the dungeon copy-paste ones, straight to the bottom, and I'm putting them all on the same level, even if they make sense lore-wise, because they weren't designed as gank fights in the first place. Luckily, FromSoft typically avoids this design for their main bosses, even as early as Dark Souls 1. The only mandatory ones that I can think of are the Gargoyles and the 4 Kings, but they're boring more so than bad, and I think anything I can say about the bosses in the dungeons of Elden Ring apply to them. So with that out of the way, now let's talk about some specific bosses. We're going to start with what I believe is an honorable mention, and that's the Twin Princes. Because while you do technically fight 2 enemies at once, this isn't really a gank. It's more like a second phase with 2 health bars. And while this is one of my favorite boss designs in Dark Souls 3, if the second phase just had the elder brother grow a hand out of his back and gain a couple of new moves, the fight would be effectively the exact same. In this case, the second boss doesn't create a second source of pressure. He acts as a moveset extension. So again, I love the design, I love the fight, but I don't think it qualifies as a gank. So I'm going to put it in its own little tier of 1.5 bosses and call it a day. Let's begin the proper list with what I believe is the worst multi-boss fight in Dark Souls. We have Throne Watcher and Throne Defender, Ornstein and Smoent. This boss can range from barely a problem to incredibly tedious. They have very low health relative to when you fight them, but can revive each other to full HP infinitely. They also lack any interesting moves or AI. One is just a little slower, which keeps the fight from being totally insufferable. Overall, this is a gank fight that is just incredibly uninteresting. I'm also going to give them a special lore mention, because in a series known for bosses having deep and rich stories to them, if you look into these guys, you learn that Throne Defender defends the throne, and Throne Watcher watches it. 10 out of 10, Vadi, when is the Prepare to Cry? This isn't the most frustrating or difficult gank boss, but it is the most boring. The res mechanic is at least kind of cool. I am glad they did it, but better with Twin Princes. Next up, we have the same idea, but done way more frustrating. The Godskin duo. There are a couple of improvements in this fight. Both of the Godskins share a health bar, so even though they can res, it doesn't fully reset the fight. That concludes the improvements. Actually though, I may just be Stockholmed, but this is far from my least favorite boss in Souls. My issue isn't that it's hard, it's that it's kind of unintuitive. The best way to deal with this fight is to not fight one of them at all. It has the pillars in the room just like Ornstein and Smo, which lets you separate the two bosses, but unlike Ornstein and Smo, once you get one of the bosses stuck on a pillar, they really don't do a good job at ever escaping to pressure you again. So this almost feels like a one-on-one fight with a big inconvenience. To make that even more prevalent of a feeling, both of these bosses are pretty strong and legitimate threats on their own, with big hitboxes, varied movesets, and a lot of pressure, which makes it so that there really isn't a way that you can fight both at once. The shared health bar that fixes the res mechanic also creates a weird side effect. Most players barely engage with one of the enemies. It is much better to just focus one down, let him resurrect, and then focus him down again, especially since both of these bosses have a phase 2 at half health. And one of the easiest ways to lose the fight instantly is to have both in phase 2 at the same time. This one is just a weak encounter. It's kind of carried for me because I like fighting Godskin nobles, but it feels like a filler boss that is mandatory. The one genuinely interesting thing here is Sleep, which is a status effect you can apply to enemies that typically doesn't do anything. But here you can put one of them down for an absurd amount of time, which is cool. Nowhere else really uses the mechanic, but it's also telling. If the cleanest strategy is to remove one boss from the fight entirely, maybe it was never made to be a 2-on-1. Let's change things up a little bit and talk about a gank fight that I actually really like, the Abyss Watchers. At first glance, this looks like it completely breaks my rule about not liking duplicate enemies rushing you down, and honestly, on paper, it kind of does. But this fight's gimmick absolutely saves it for me. Sometimes a red-eyed Abyss Watcher spawns, and he can fight the others. That single mechanic gives you breathing room, it creates a natural aggro break, and if you get lucky, he can even solo most of the first phase for you. On top of that, the additional watchers that spawn go down in just a couple of hits, and you can attack them before they're fully done spawning in. So managing the gank is its own skill. You're not just running around hoping for desync, you're actively managing the main boss so that you can hopefully interrupt the spawning mini-enemies. That's interesting and intentional. And it culminates in one of the coolest transitions into Phase 2 in the series. The boss stops being a gank entirely and just becomes an awesome fight. So points for that, but we'll stop scoring it there. The important takeaway is this: a gank fight that gives you tools to control the chaos is always going to feel better than one that just doubles the pressure with quantity. Okay, this is the gank fight. Ornstein and Smo. It's iconic, it's memorable, it's one of the most important bosses in the series. There are things it absolutely gets right. The arena design, for one. The pillars are there specifically to help you split them up. You can isolate one if you're patient, but they're mobile and aggressive enough you can't just trap one and forget them. And the size difference between them isn't just a visual. Smo is slow and heavy. Ornstein is fast and aggressive, but also has a ranged attack. They clearly tried to create role separation here, but it's still a little rough around the edges. Ornstein's charge famously can bug out. Smo's hitboxes are interesting. Sometimes the pressure overlaps in ways that doesn't really feel fair, but it works more often than it doesn't. For its time, this was a massive step forward. Two bosses with an arena designed to make them manageable, and movesets that only felt complete because they were fighting together. I don't think it's the best gank fight, but it definitely holds up well for how early it came. It also has a dynamic phase 2 based on which one you kill first, which does a lot to make this boss stand out. Overall, I like the fight despite the jank. Moving into our only representative from Bloodborne, the Shadows of Yharnam, which means I would love to show you Bloodborne footage, but unfortunately Sony disagrees. so here's some art that explains the fight. This fight starts with 3 health bars, 3 human-sized figures in black cloaks, and they're holding 3 different weapons. What makes it work is that they actually have roles, just like I was saying about Ornstein and Smo. 2 of them will pressure you in melee, while 1 stays back and casts. The arena also supports this design. There's cover to break line of sight from the caster, and 1 melee shadow is faster than the other, so you can split them up. These enemies are easy to stagger and can be parried to buy you a break. So instead of sprinting in circles hoping for desync, you can actively cause it yourself. What you do once they're split up is up to you. You can isolate the mage, you can bully the faster melee one, or you could just hit whoever's closest and split your damage. They don't relentlessly collapse on you with 0 gaps. And when you do kill one, the others gain new moves, so the difficulty stays roughly the same even as the fight evolves, which is very smart escalation. And then in the final phase, after you've killed 2 shadows, they summon a giant snake that can one-shot you. Yeah, I never said this was a perfect fight, but as a gank, this is one of the cleanest executions in the series. Then there's Sister Freed. Full disclosure, I love this fight, but the 2-on-1 phase isn't why people remember it. It's smoke and mirrors for the big twist of this boss, which, even though it's 15 years old, I don't really want to spoil. During phase 2, Ariandel rushes you down. Freed throws out large, arena-covering attacks. There's no meaningful cover, and if you get an unlucky cycle where both commit to big AoEs at the same time, you can just die. It's functional, but it's not elegant. If I were ranking just the gank portion, this is a C-tier gank in an S-tier fight. It's saved by low health values and just how good Freed is overall. Phase 1 and 2 don't overstay their welcome, which keeps it from becoming frustrating. But as a multi-enemy design, it's not the best work they've done. Finally, let's talk about my personal favorite duo boss in the series. And I am sure this will be controversial. I adore the Demon Princes, and them coming back in Night Rain was awesome. But let's talk about why. First, the arena is built perfectly for their design. It's one of the most open boss arenas in the series, with no cover. But there's also nothing you're realistically going to get stuck on. It is pure open space. Now, if both of them rushed you down, this would absolutely suck. FromSoft knew that, so they built a system around it. The demons swap between 2 modes. One becomes sluggish and ranged, the other becomes an aggressive rushdown. The ranged attacks are slow enough to avoid, as long as you're managing the aggressive demon properly. That's the key. You're fighting 2 enemies at once, but you're rarely put into a situation where good play can't get you out. The pressure alternates, it breathes, and it feels intentional. Yes, sometimes they both end up buffed at the same time, and that does make for a more frustrating moment, but it's pretty rare. And honestly, it makes the fight all the more memorable because it can become that hectic, so I'll excuse it. And if that wasn't enough, which demon you kill first determines the final phase, borrowing one of the best ideas from Ornstein and Smo. It's refined and it's clean. It feels like everything they've learned about multi-enemy design coming together. Easily my favorite duo boss in the series. So now I'm curious. Are Ornstein and Smo overrated? Are Demon Princes as good as I think? Would you count Twin Princes as a gank at all? Let me know. One thing that I found really interesting is just how much Elden Ring stepped away from doing any multi-boss encounters. Like among the main bosses that you have to beat in Elden Ring, I think the Godskin duo is the only duo boss, which kind of makes me sad because I do like these fights, especially when they're done very well. But maybe they just felt like there wasn't anything new they could do with this style, which brought them away from it. Or maybe people just typically didn't really like it. I don't know. I had a lot of fun replaying Dark Souls 3 to get this footage. Less so Dark Souls 1, but I still like it. And yes, I even played Dark Souls 2 this time. So the 5 of you who have that as your favorite Souls game can relax. Anyway, that's all for now. Until next time, see ya.